All right. Well, again, welcome to another exciting webinar from Siemens, the Machine Tool Systems segment, looking at all things SINUMERIK. So today we're going to get an opportunity to delve even further into the topic of OPC UA. So this is part two of a webinar series, but it's actually the fourth content generated in this topic to help support you in your path towards OPC UA. So thanks again, and let's get into it. Hold on, here we go. Okay. So I did want to just kind of give those that might be new to our event. Maybe you haven't been to one of our sessions before. We do like to run these events every 2 months, every 6 weeks to 2 months, depending on our frequency. So certainly, if you're new, I want to kind of give you an idea of where you can look for additional material. And for sure, since you've come to the event, you'll now be registered for our contact list. So we will email out content as it comes further out in the future. But the two sites I would say you really want to kind of know and understand that exist out on the market. One would be our main, what we call our CNC for You web page. There you can find links to all of our webinars, our training. That is a great website tool for all things kind of operation and programming based, but you all will also find a lot of references to some technical material. Um, so I would say, check out the CNC4U website. The URL is right here on the top of our screen if you haven't been to it, usa.siemens.com. CNC4U is the full URL, so /CNC4U. There you can get access to our webinars, as I mentioned. You can also get access to our in-person training classes are listed here. Additionally, we also offer virtual trainings. All of our training classes are instructor-led, and they are 100% complimentary. So feel free to kind of explore them. And if you're interested, you can register right on our website or reach out to myself or any of my team members, and we'd be happy to talk to you about them further. Now, additionally, the second site that I wanted to make sure you were aware of is our Mr. CNC YouTube channel. In a lot of cases, guys kind of ask, where is the content can be found post event. You generally speaking, you would want to look for the Mr. CNC channel. So we have all kinds of different content here. We certainly post our videos from our webinars that we host. We produce a lot of, shorter standalone kind of how-to videos. We also do a YouTube live series. So if you haven't seen it, please, by all means, check it out. Make sure, you remember to like, share, and subscribe. And obviously give us your comments. We always enjoy being able to, engage with the market space and the industry, and certainly through comments is a great way to do it. Now, additionally, what we've done, and we've kind of refocused, and we want to expand. We're going to continue bringing you all of the operation and programming centric material that we have done in the past, but we also wanted to delve more into the technical side of the control. So certainly, this OPC UA series is a good example of that. But there's all kinds of material, and instead of it kind of all intermixing in the same YouTube channel, we've created a second Mr. CNC channel that we call Mr. CNC Insights. So that you can go straight to it with this YouTube URL. You can go to YouTube and just type in Mr. CNC Insights. I'm sure if you just type in Mr. CNC, you'll find both pages. We do also have a link on the Mr. CNC YouTube page to get to the insights and vice versa. So there's all different ways to kind of get to it. But moving forward, any of our service and commissioning topics are going to be hosted on the Insights channel, and then we will have links to them in our favorites of of how to kind of get back and forth between the two. So check out the channel for sure. Follow that one as well. You're going to want to follow it separately because it technically is its own YouTube channel. So make sure you like and follow there as well. And we do have our VPE program that hopefully you guys are familiar with, but if you're not, it's what we call our virtual product expert. And this is a great way for you to get access to a Siemens product specialist if you need to delve into something in a little more detail. Let's say you explored some of this video material we have out there, and you have a very specific question, and you need to get to that right guy, and hopefully he can answer it. What you can do is you go to CNC for You. There's a link to the VP program. You fill out a little questionnaire, and it's going to get emailed to my colleague, Brian Baumgartner. He manages the program. And then Brian will either then set up a session between him and you, or he's going to pull in one of the other product specialists, maybe myself, maybe one of my other team members, even maybe somebody from another department specific to your question. Events are generally an hour long. If it's going to take significantly more than that, then we might need to set you up with a different path. But it's a great area to start, and again, get access to somebody with a high working knowledge of this product. So with that being said, appropriately enough, I get a chance to introduce you guys again to my colleague, Brian Baumgartner. Brian is going to be coming in. He is our product specialist from the commissioning side. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Chris.
Perfect. We got you. So Brian's going to kind of take over control here. He's going to go into this OPC UA topic. I'm going to be hanging out in case anybody has any questions or whatnot. Then I'll come back in the end. We will do a full Q&A session. So go to the questions tab, and as Brian's presenting, type in your questions as they kind of pop up, and we will cover them in the end. But without further ado, Brian, I'm going to switch it over to you. And once the lag comes through, you should have control. So you should have it now.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chris, very much for the introduction. Welcome, everyone, to Unlocking the Power of OPC UA with SINUMERIK Controls, Part 2. We have a great agenda plan today. We're going to kick it off with getting started with OPC UA. This was a supplemental video series that was produced to aid this webinar today. We're just going to get into the highlights, but a lot more information as well as live demonstrations related to those 3 supplemental videos can be found in this area. After we talk about that, we're going to get into certificate handling, then user administration, diagnostics, and archives. And then we'll wrap up with the live demonstration of the C# application that I've created based off of the S7-1500 helper class that I got from CEOS, support.industry.siemens.com. So, for those of you who weren't aware of our Getting Started with OPC UA series, it was composed of 3 installments. We had the first video being OPC UA licensing, the second being installation, and the third being setup. We're going to get into each of these one by one here as we go. So the first video was P67 licensing. First, we'll have an overview of this P67 option. Now, if you have an 828D control or an 840D solution line control, as long as your CNC software is greater than or equal to 4.5 Service Pack 4, then you'll be able to use the Access My Machine OPC UA option and the article number that we have for the runtime option on the control as shown just here where my mouse is. If you're purchasing from the software group, it's going to be this MCIS number over here on the right. Now, if the target system is a SINUMERIK 1 control, in this case, all of the softwares of SINUMERIK 1 are compatible with Access My Machine OPC UA. You're going to use the Machine Tool Systems part number that you see here. Or if you're using the software group, it's going to be here on the right. And the difference is, just like for all of our runtime options for SINUMERIK controls, between SINUMERIK 1 and the 840D is the 9th character that you see as an A for the 840, but as a B for the SINUMERIK 1. So now moving on, how to purchase the desired license. So if you already have a preferred Siemens sales channel, I definitely would encourage you to approach them to purchase the license. But if you don't, I wanted to let you know about a new path that you could go to. So this is dex.siemens.com, industrial software, and from here you can get to the Machine Tool software store. Here we're able to look at a lot of different products that are in the software portfolio. We can add them to a cart and then request a quote. So we're not going to get a price directly, but Siemens or one of our third parties will reach out to you and give you the information you need to purchase the product. So moving forward, we're going to look at identifying the target system memory card serial number. With any of our runtime options, we do need to associate them with a real CNC. Real CNCs are described by an identifier on either the compact flash card or, in the case of SINUMERIK 1, on the SD card. For these operations, we want to be at least at user level. If we have the service password or the manufacturer password, those will be great as well, but we do need to have password access to get to all these screens that we need to get to. Once we're in the setup area, if we click on licenses, now the first thing we're going to see at the top is the serial number of the CF card or the SD card that we need. So that's one place to get it. You could take note of that there, or another great way to do it is to click here, Export License Requirement. So in this way, we can save some files to a USB stick, and embedded in those files, we'll have the serial number of the CF card. We're talking about now buying the license, but in case you want to try it out, I do want to mention this area here, Activate Test License. So we're able to actually go in, try out the OPC UA server, and see if it meets our needs. If we like it and we want to purchase it, that's when we come back here and click Export License Requirement. Again, the actual part number is going to be inside the files that we export. So next, we have obtaining the certificate of license after purchase. So there's a little process here that I'm going to go through. This is just high level, but the first thing that you're going to get is an email from the online software delivery system. Here, we're going to click on the email that's going to open up the online software delivery portal, at which point we can generate the electronic certificates of license as a PDF file. We could also go to the Web License Manager, and the license number and delivery note number are going to be automatically copied and pasted here for us. So next, I'm going to get into some of the details about the high-level process, which I just went through before. After the purchase order, the first thing that we expect is an email. Now this is going to have a link in it to the online software delivery system, as well as your login name for the Industry Mall account that you have. There'll be some information about the order described in the email here. The next thing that you need to do after clicking the link is log in to the online software delivery system. So you'll click on the login button, and importantly, if you don't already have access, you will get a temporary password so you can log in with that. Or if you already have an account, you'll log in there. And once you're in, there's an assignment here with a drop down for your role. Anybody who's working with these licenses and actually downloading the licenses, associating them with physical systems, needs to be logged in as a co-signee. So that's what we would pick here is co-signee. And then once we're in, we're going to be able to view our certificate by clicking the button here, which will download the PDF file, or we can go direct to the Web License Manager by clicking the link. One important thing is that once we do click on the certificate, we're going to see a green checkbox appear next to the certificate that just indicates that it's been opened. So that's just one important thing to note. The final thing that we can do in the online software delivery system is that we can download a packing list. The delivery notes are going to be available for 12 months after the initial purchase, and the download should be available within 2 days. So as soon as we get the delivery, the download may or may not be there, but it shouldn't take more than 2 days to appear. This is the output that we have from the online software delivery system. It's the electronic certificate of license. People that have been working with SINUMERIK for a long time may be familiar with paper licenses that were delivered in white envelopes. Now, those generally have been superseded with these electronic licenses, though the paper licenses may still be available for the 828 and the 840D solution line. The final section here is actually generating the license key with the Web License Manager. So now that we have this precondition met of having our electronic certificate of license, what we're able to do is log in to the Web License Manager, here abbreviated as WLM. There's a couple ways we can log in. The one that I demonstrate is direct access, but if you're doing this a whole lot, then you may find scanning the barcodes is a better fit for your use case. But for those that use direct access, the next thing you're going to see is this input field. You can add the license number and delivery note number too. If we click on the link from the online software delivery, it's actually going to populate those fields for us, so we don't have to do that manually. Next, we'll select our product here in the hardware serial number area. This is where we enter the number that we recorded on the licensing page. But if we exported the license requirement, we could also browse and import the text file there to specify the hardware ID. Next, we would click this button here. You can kind of see in the snippet that there's a step tree along the top with all these radial buttons. As we go, we're going to work our way from left to right, so we're going to start with login, identify product, then we'll do select licenses. So here we get to select licenses. We're able to identify the machine with a unique name if we wish to. Now we're going to see the licenses that are already on it, and then we're also going to be able to select extra licenses. In this case, if you've just purchased the P67 license, you'll see it here. Next, we can assign it. So if we know everything looks good, we've got the right hardware serial number, we'll assign it, and finally generate our license key. So for the SINUMERIK 1, the license key is going to be a zip file, and for the 828 or the 840D, it's going to be a .alm file or text file. And once we have the license key, we're able to proceed to the final section, which is installing it on the target system. So here, if we have an 840D or the 828, we're going to be able to type it directly, if we wish to, all the characters of license key. If we don't wish to type it, we can read it in as that .txt or .alm file. But if we have the SINUMERIK 1, it's important to note that there's a little text box that previously was editable that's now going to be grayed out. So the only option we have is to read in the license key using this button here. We want to read it in directly as a zip file. So once we have read it in the file, we're going to see that our P67 option is licensed. So there'll be a checkbox here. The final thing that we want to do is make sure that we've set the licenses so we see a check in both of these columns indicating that the runtime license is set and ready to go. So the next, we're going to get into why upgrade. So moving back just one step, this is the server installation section. It was the second video in the series of 3 getting started with OPC UA. So as we go here, first and foremost, if you are using the OPC UA server for data access, which is for most people the primary use case, you likely don't have to upgrade at all. This operation is really only necessary, for example, if you're using a customer-specific object model. So this is what we talked about in part 1, where we might be creating a customer-specific object model to comply with a certain companion standard. And the idea here is that we can create all the variables we want, which are normally called nodes in OPC UA, and we can map those to other nodes in the SINUMERIK namespace, giving them more meaningful names. So if this is a feature you use, then you might want to use server version 4.1, since we have added some additional support for those customer-specific object models. Also, for example, if you use OPC UA Advanced, which is a successor to Create My Interface, you could find value with server 4.0 versions. It's important to know that this feature is largely event-driven, so those events are triggered by the PLC, though there are some methods that you can call in OPC UA Advanced that don't exist in the regular OPC UA. Generally, people that use this are going to be doing deeper applications, maybe that involve PLC, so it's not something that everybody uses. The final reason you might want to upgrade could be unexpected behavior. So if the server is not working as you expect and you contact Siemens, there may be a chance that they tell you to upgrade, so that would be the process we describe next, how to upgrade. So here we have preparation and compatibility notes. I have a little flowchart for us where we start in the upper left, we work our way down to the lower right, and the first question is the target a SINUMERIK 1 or is it an MC? If it's a SINUMERIK 1 or an MC, then we have major release 4, and that's compatible. But if it's an 828, for example, or a SINUMERIK 840D solution line, we're going to want to look for the latest major release 3. Now, normally I would go with the latest release, and that's what I would do. I'd just check it to be sure that it's compatible. But if for some reason you don't want to go with the latest release, or if maybe you find that it's not compatible, you could just look for an earlier release, make sure it is, and then you're fine. So now, how do we check if it's compatible? Now, what we need to know is the SINUMERIK Operate version. So to get there, we would go to Menu Select and then Diagnostics on the front end of our control. And then we'd go to Version, and inside the CNC software object, we're going to see the CNC SINUMERIK Operate version. So in this case, it was 6.21. And when we look at the compatibility table here, we see that 6.21 is compatible with version 4.0, Service Pack 1, and onwards. So if you wanted to find these compatibility tables yourself, this link here goes to the OPC UA configuration manual, and I definitely suggest checking that out. There's a lot of great information there. We're going to come back to that manual in just a bit as we continue. So now, how to obtain the installation files. There is a self-service portal that is an excellent resource. This portal is Machinum, and from here you can download all the software that you're entitled to on your own. So here you go to support.sw.siemens.com. You're going to then log in with your own credentials, pick the software you'd like from the drop-down list, and then download it. So in our case, we need Access My Machine OPC UA. We're here in this screenshot getting server version 3, Service Pack 1, hotfix 5. So after we click, the next thing to do would be to get this zip file. Inside the zip file, you'll find the installation files. So now, on the installation side of it, there are a lot of different scenarios that you might have. You might be running your OPC UA server directly off the CNC. It could be running on a PC front-end or even in a virtual machine. The next video that was produced to supplement this webinar, OPC UA installation, has all three of these scenarios covered. So you can, at your own leisure, go check out Chapter 5, Chapter 6, or Chapter 7, depending upon your installation scenario. So now we move on to the last of the Getting Started with OPC UA videos. This one is server configuration. So first, we'll talk about the network architecture. The OPC UA server can be installed in a lot of different scenarios. The first one we'll talk about is virtual. So for the most part, this is a situation where the customer application, aka the client, is running on the same Windows system as the server. This would be for testing purposes, maybe at a trade show, or maybe for some other fun reasons. You might decide to broadcast the OPC UA server on a port of the computer and then connect it to a client application on another PC. So that's another thing you can do. The next is local. So here it's actually very much the same as our Create My Virtual Machine solution, where we have both the client application and the server application running on the same Windows PC. The only difference is we have SINUMERIK Operate for IPC or SINUMERIK Operate for PC rather than this product here. Great. Now we have what I believe is by far the most common scenario, which is the network scenario. So here we have two different styles where if we have a PC front end, we may connect a client application over the network to that, and we could also connect the SINUMERIK 1 CNC only from the network. Now, in the video that you'll find that accompanies this webinar, we focus mostly on the virtual and the network installation scenarios because the local one really is the same or very similar to Create My Virtual Machine with the client application running on the same computer. So for people that don't know about the communication concept of the NCU, I want to go over that first before we get into more details. There are three networks we have to be aware of, where those are the field network, the machine network, and the company network. The field network is what we're going to use to connect to distributed I/O, or inputs and outputs. We have a couple different protocols. We might have Profibus going to these output modules. We might have Profinet here. Then we have the machine network. So this is where we connect it to industrial Ethernet-enabled devices, such as machine control panels and thin client units. We also have a possibility, if we have a PC front end, to connect to SIMATIC IPCs or third-party PCs. And finally, we have the company network. So what's unique about these ports, the X160 port on the SINUMERIK 1 as well as the X130, is that we can set them to whichever subnet we need to in order to connect the existing subnets of the factory. So these are very nice to get information out of the machine network or the field network. So now we've talked a lot about all the different interfaces of the control on this slide, but next I want to talk just about the interfaces that pertain to OPC UA. So when we look at the X120, 127, and 130, all of these interfaces can be configured to broadcast the SINUMERIK OPC UA server. So these are the ones we're going to look at most critically in this webinar. It's useful to know that we actually do have the capability to run an OPC UA server in our PLC, and that server can be broadcast on the X160 and X150 interfaces. That particular information, though, is outside the scope of the webinar today. Perhaps we'll do a follow-up if there's interest on that topic at a later date. So the next scenario here on the right is that of a PC front-end system. So if we have a PC front-end system, normally we're not running SINUMERIK Operate in the NCU within the Linux environment. Instead, it's running in the Windows environment. So we would connect our front-end system through that machine network that we looked at moments ago. And that would usually be connected to a SIMATIC IPC at interface X2. Now, for this demonstration, in our network configuration, we're going to use the X130 and the X1, as these are most commonly used to connect to a company network. So now, we'll look at an example company network configuration. In the supplemental video that preceded this webinar, I used a demonstration PC with a wired network interface card connected directly to a network switch. That network switch connected to a CNC-only system via the X130 port. I also had a PC front-end system here, and I connected it to X1 like we talked about. To do this, I used the subnetwork 192.168.21, and I reserved node 251 for my demonstration PC that had the client on it. And then for my first node, which here is 192.168.21.1, I used the CNC only port X130. And for the front-end system, I used node 2 and interface X1. There was one more scenario that I went through. This was my virtual machine. And here I used the loopback adapter 127.0.0.1 to facilitate the connection to the client running at the same time. So the first thing that I need to do is set up my static IP address on my client. And I did this by going to my connections in properties and then going to IPv4 settings and finally specifying my static IP address here. Next, once I have the client set up, I have to go to my two different servers and set those up as well. So here we have the CNC only scenario. The best place to set the company network IP address is in the area here that we have access to by going to Diagnostics, Bus TCP IP, TCP IP Diagnostics, TCP IP config, and then change. So once we're here, we can specify an IP address, as you can see there, as static, which is an address type manual. The next scenario is that of the PC front end. So here, the screen is very similar, but it is a little bit different. I assign node address 2 here. This is a way to change the same settings that you would through the Windows interface, going to your network connections, properties, IPv4 settings, but the result is usually a lot better if you use SINUMERIK Operate for PC or IPC to make these changes. So I definitely recommend doing them through Operate rather than doing them through Windows. Once we've set up our two servers from the client, we can ping and we can check that the basic communication is there. So in this case, since I had very good results, I knew that the system was communicating and I could move on to the next step. The next step would be setting up the OPC UA server. Now, in the CNC only scenario, we have to be sure first off in our settings that we have a checkbox next to the network we'd like to broadcast over. So previously, we configured node address 1, subnet 192.168.21, so we have a checkbox there. The default TCP port for OPC UA communications is 4840, so that's what we've used for the TCP port. We get to select which message encryption types we want, and then most importantly, this is where we activate the OPC UA server full stop. Next, we configured the CNC plus Windows PC system, so we made sure that the checkbox was next to the company network in order to broadcast the server and make it available at that IP address. We connected the port again to 4840, and again, most importantly, activated the server with the checkbox. Now, the final thing that we did was also set up my virtual machine. So here you can see that we're using the loopback adapter at 127.0.0.1, and that we've also activated the server. So now that the basic settings are made to facilitate the communication, we can get into the server authentication area. Here we go to Network OPC UA Authentication and then Change. We have to put in whatever admin user we want. I believe that OPC UA Client is the default to find in some of our documentation, as well as when you freshly install the server. Then we have to create a password, confirm the password, and decide whether we want anonymous access or not, and whether we want to accept certificates automatically or not. We're going to go over this in a lot more detail in some of the new content. One important thing when we're making our passwords to be aware of is that we may be constrained to using a password that has at least one uppercase letter, at least a lowercase, at least a number, and a special character, as well as complying with the rule that we need to have at least 8 characters. The newest OPC UA servers do have these rules built into them. The older ones may not, but my recommendation is definitely to use secure passwords and follow these rules whether you have to or not. And finally, there's a lot of additional configurations that you could make. So in this webinar and in the supporting videos, I go over a couple different scenarios, but yours might be unique. So if you want to get into even more information about OPC UA, go and check out the configuration manual that you'll find at this link. Eventually, these will all make it to YouTube, and the links will be in the description. Finally, we have testing the server with OPC UA. For this, my favorite client to use is UA Expert. This is from Unified Automation. If you use this link here, you can download it yourself. You may have to make an account, but it is free to download and free to use. So once we have that client, we can add the servers. For example, we can use custom discovery and type in the IP address of our CNC-only system. And then we can select the encryption protocol that we wish to use. Fill in the credentials of the administrator user, and then connect. One thing to be aware of is that this is case sensitive. A common thing that happens is that within the operate environment, when we specify the password for the administrator user, we could accidentally input the wrong case. The characters are hidden as we're inputting them, so we don't really know if they're positive or negative, or rather uppercase or lowercase. So if we're not logging in with the right password, we're going to see this message, bad user access denied. If that's the case, we might try to invert the characters to make our passwords match. The first time we log in, we'll see that the certificates need to be accepted. We might see a message like this. Once we accept it, it turns green and we can connect. Once we're connected, you can see the 2 namespaces, server and SINUMERIK. Here, we can drag in the nodes that we wish to subscribe to, and then we'll see the value. As a test, if we switch between jog and auto, we can see the values change. Finally, the next example I want to look at is just how to set up a connection with the local client. So we have to use this loopback adapter here for that operation. Now in some systems, you're going to have local discovery enabled, so you won't have to use custom discovery, but you can always use custom discovery if you'd like to. And in this case, we'll just put in the URL 127.0.0.1, and then again, we'll be able to select the encryption mode we want. So thank you for hanging with me for that introduction. Now we get into the new content. Here we have certificate handling. Now, a lot of information is going to be in the configuration manual. What I've done for us is I've taken that information and parsed it out into a presentation in PowerPoint, but definitely there's more information in the manual that I wasn't able to cover here. So do be aware that it's there for you to access as you need it. The first thing to know about certificates is that to establish a secure connection between an OPC UA server and a client, is that it's necessary to exchange and trust the certificate of the other communication partner. And this applies both to our server as well as to our client. So we need to have certificates for the client on the server and certificates for the server on the client. On the SINUMERIK side, we can accept certificates automatically, which isn't recommended, but if we do that, it's just going to automatically be trusted. If we don't do that, then we have the opportunity to trust the certificate if we wish to, which is recommended. I'm going to demo all of this real soon, but just so we have an idea of what we're going to get into, on the left side here, you can see the vertical soft keys of the server area. We have two different operations that we can support when we go to renew the server. So the first thing we can do is specify the expiration date. So how long is the server certificate pulled for? And then we can also decide if we're going to include the IP address or the DNS name in the server certificate. Now, if we're using a DHCP, for example, we might not want to have the IP address in the certificate because that might be changing, but at the same time, a lot of clients might require the IP address, so we're pretty much just going to have to generate the certificate based on the needs of the client. That is, if we're using certificates. We'll get into the anonymous users later on. So the next thing that we're going to do is export. From the server area, we can also export the certificate. The certificates always have this extension .der. Not all clients are going to be able to automatically accept certificates, so if we have a specific client that's going to need the certificate manually installed, this operation would support that. Next, we look at the vertical soft keys. We kind of work our way down to trusted. From the trusted area, we can delete and import certificates. Most importantly is importing. So this would be if we wanted to manually trust a certificate, we can import that into our server from the client. Rejected here is for trusting. So here on the rejected tab, which is one lower, we can delete certificates that we don't want, but we can also trust them, and then they're automatically going to be added to the trusted area. So now the fun part, we're going to do some demos. Here I have pulled Create My Virtual Machine up, and I'm in the Network OPC UA area, looking at the server. I'll back out just so you can see the workflow to get back. So for a moment, you saw that the server status was red. That's normal. That does toggle from time to time. Now it's okay. Next, we're going to go over from this landing page to certificate server, and then I'm going to export the server certificate. First, I'll click Renew so you can see this is the pop-up that allows us to specify how long the server is valid for, as well as if it includes the IP address and the DNS name. I'll cancel out of that because everything is good and just export it. And so in my case, I'm going to export it to my USB drive, just like that. I get an indication that says that the export of the DER was successful, so that's good. And now I'm going to show how we can import that into the Unified Automation UA Expert client. So to do that, I'm going to go to Settings and then Manage Certificates. So here you can see that I have a couple trusted certificates, but not all. Here I can open this certificate location, and what I'm going to do is go to my USB drive. So I've just created this .der file. I'm going to drag it in. Now I can see that it's in there. When I come back to UA Expert, if I refresh, I can now see that I've just added a certificate at the loopback adapter for Create My Virtual Machine. So everything there looks good. Now, the next thing that has to do with automatically accepting or not accepting client certificates. In Create My Virtual Machine here, I actually set it up if we go back and then to authentication, such that I'm neither allowing anonymous access nor am I allowing accepting of certificates automatically. Therefore, I'm going to have to do this manually or use the trusted and rejected buttons. So here, if I go to trusted, what I can do within UA Expert is I'm actually able to copy the application certificate. So if I click this button and then scroll down to my USB stick again, this is a manual export process for the client certificate. I'll say save. And now, if I go back to create my virtual machine, what I could do is import. So here from the USB stick, I want to import my UA Expert certificate, and I do that just like that. So now I've got the client certificate in my server. If I wanted, I can at this point make a connection to it. So I'm going to add, and then I'm going to go to my loopback adapter, and I'm going to select the encryption mode I want, type in the credentials of my administrator, type in my password, and then connect. So you can see automatically it did just connect as we expected it to. So that's great how that works. The next thing I want to do is show how I can use the rejected page. So here, if I disconnect and come back to create my virtual machine, what I could do is actually delete this. In this scenario, we're assuming that we no longer trust UA Expert, so we're going to delete the certificate, and then I'm going to see what happens when I connect or attempt to connect again with UA Expert. So I can see here at the moment, I don't have any rejected certificates, but from UA Expert, if I attempt now to connect, I get a message that says bad security checks failed, so we'll see what happened. Well, what happened here when I go to reject it again is that I can see that there is a certificate there. If I wish to, I can trust it just like that and say, okay. So now I've moved that certificate into my trusted area, and from UA Expert, if I wish to connect again, I can see that I was able to do so successfully. So that's all working as expected. The last thing that I want to mention is that just moments ago, what we did was we went into our certificate area and we manually added it to UA Expert. UA Expert is actually a pretty powerful client, so it does support copying of the server certificate into the client automatically if we wish to. So what I'm going to do is just delete this here like that, say OK, and now attempt to connect again. So now when I connect, you can see this window just came up, certificate validation. I do trust this. This is from Siemens. It's the certificate we know is good, so we're going to trust it. Continue, and now I'm able to connect again. So that's a demonstration of how the certificates work. And with that, I'm going to just disconnect here, remove my server, and get back to our presentation. The next thing that we can go into is user administration, now that we've handled certificates. So just as was the case with our certificates, there's a lot of really good information in our configuration manual. I highly suggest looking at that on your own, but getting in now to user administration as it's been prepared for this presentation, the first thing you need to know is that the admin user is the only user that can add and delete other users and assign rights to those users. So that's what the administrator is administrating. The administrator is administrating the user privileges. The admin user is able to add users, delete users, list users, change passwords, give access rights, remove access rights, and list access rights. It's just something to note that if you are the admin user, you are the one responsible for making sure that the strategy you pick is secure. So we're going to get into how all of these different methods work, or at least a lot of them very shortly. But next, we have a couple of different notes to mention. First, it's the anonymous connection. We are able to make an anonymous connection. So this is definitely a supported feature, but if you are logged in anonymously, a lot of methods aren't going to work. The next thing is that anonymous users by default don't have read or write access. So we're going to have to explicitly give them the rights that we want them to have. And also, even to that point, the administrator user doesn't have write access by default. So by default, the administrator actually can only read. Therefore, we have to give the administrator write access if that's something we want them to do. There are a whole lot of different rights. When I created this presentation, these were the rights available. And as time goes, maybe even more will be developed. So you really can get into the details of which user has which rights to develop a secure strategy for managing your systems. And shortly, what we're going to do is actually create a tool management client, and we're going to give them tool read and write access. But that tool management client is not going to be able to do anything else. So that could be a use case for some people. The next one to look into is how to allow anonymous access. So here, if for example, your client doesn't manage certificates or it doesn't have users, things like that, we can actually allow complete anonymous access. So to do that, we would set the message encryption to none, and we would allow anonymous access with this checkbox here. Probably we would also want to think about accepting certificates automatically or not. This is on the SINUMERIK side. So the SINUMERIK server is capable of accepting client certificates automatically, and you may or may not want to have that checked. The main thing here is just to note that we don't recommend anonymous access. This is really only if you must use it because your client doesn't support users and that kind of thing. But if you do want to use this, you would go ahead and then call give user access. You have to explicitly give the anonymous user SINUREAD access for them to be able to browse the SINUMERIK namespace and see values. Now on to the next demonstration. What we're going to demonstrate next is user administration. I have pulled up here in 828D. This was the CNC-only system that we upgraded the software on together in the second edition of the Getting Started with OPC UA series. One thing I want to show is that this server is set up for anonymous access, so we have it set here to allow anonymous access. If we go back and look at our settings, we can also see that we have message encryption none checked. So we're going to get into that in a bit, but first I want to log in as the administrator from UA Expert and show that process. Here we are connecting to node 1, and I'm going to go down, and as the administrator I'll connect with the most secure encryption protocol available. Then I'm going to go and type OPC UA client just like that. I'm going to store my password and finally connect automatically. So I click OK. I can see I'm already connected here. Now to manage the users, we have to utilize methods. In methods, we can see various options here in our namespace. The first thing I want to do is get my access rights. So I'm going to call that, and when I call it, I can see as the administrator user, I have SINUREAD access. So I don't currently have write access, but if I wanted to grant write access for the administrator user, what I would do is I would come in and then select give user access. I would right click and call, and my user here will be OPC UA. What I need to type is SINUWriteAll, which gives me the capability to write the entire SINUMERIK namespace. There are a lot of different privileges, so if you have a customer-specific object model, for example, you would have to grant privileges to read and write to and from your model using these values here separately. SINUWrite is just for SINUMERIK. So now I'm able to read and write. To double check it, what I could do is get my rights again. So I'm going to click get my access rights, call it, and I can see now that it's called again. The administrator user has both SINUREAD and SINUWrite access. So that was a successful process. The next thing I want to show here is how we can create the tool management client user. So to do that, we would want to add a user. I'm going to call that, and the username is going to be tool management client. Now before I do that, I just want to show and prove that we are adding it for the first time. So we're going to do this get user list. I'm going to call that, and you can see that we have right now just 3 users. We have OPC UA client, anonymous, and OPC UA status client. These are all our defaults. If we wanted to make a new user, we can call the add user method. We write tool management client, for example, and call it. So we can see the call succeeded, and if we want to look at the access rights, we can use the get user list method again. See that the tool management client is now there. Now we can explicitly assign the access. So here we're going to call the give user access method, and we're going to type in tool management client. we're going to give them tool write access and tool read access. Now that I've granted the user both of these, we can check just to be sure that our new user has the access rights that we expect. To do this, we would call the getUserAccessRights method, type in the new username, tool management client, call it again, and see that our operation was successful. The user has both read and write access for tool variables. So that's the demonstration there of how to create a new user. Now, the next thing I want to do is look at this anonymous user concept. So I'm going to add another session, and I'm going to go in here, and this time I'm going to connect without any encryption, and I'm going to connect anonymously. So I'll say OK. Actually, this was a recently used one. So what I'm going to do is just give it a more descriptive name, CNC only, and designate it anonymous like that. Okay, so now we are connected to the anonymous user, but when I go through and let's say I look through some of these nodes, I see a lot of messages that show bad user access denied. So some of you may be familiar with this. Well, that's because the anonymous user by default doesn't have read access. So if we want to give them read access, we need to instead go to our admin user. From the admin user, we can call the giveUserAccess method, and now we're going to give the anonymous user SINUREADAllAccess, which has just succeeded. And when we go back in, we can now see in the SINUMERIK namespace, rather than having a bad user access denied, we see the actual values, and we can also subscribe. Finally, as the anonymous user, if we try to get the user list, for example, and call, we see this error. So that was expected. Only the admin user can use the user management methods. That concludes this portion of the demonstration. I'm just going to disconnect and remove these two servers before we move on to the next part. So the next part we have to review is diagnostics and archives. Here we have, again, great information in the configuration manual. What I want to show next is just that a lot of information is available in the server namespace. So we've looked mostly at the SINUMERIK namespace, but the server namespace does have information such as build info. This is going to show you the version of the OPC UA server. So if that's interesting for your client, you can obtain that information from the server namespace. The next thing we'll get into is the diagnostics status screen. So here we have at the top a list of the IP addresses that the server is currently being broadcast over. If we see the green checkbox, that means that there's a partner on the other side. If we don't see the green checkbox, perhaps we see an X or a red cross instead. That doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It's likely just that we don't have a communication partner. Then we have the next thing, which is server status. So here it could be okay, not activated, no connection can be set up, or no more possible sessions. What we want to see is okay. That's the one that needs to be active for us to use the OPC UA server. Next, we can see the connected clients. So this is who is connected currently. And finally, we can see the subscription at the bottom. It's important to note that this isn't the overall load. Instead, this is just the subscription load. So next, from the status screen, we want to get to the diagnostic screen. We can hit the extension key on our vertical soft keys and then click vertical soft key 1 for diagnostics. From here, we're going to have a new set of vertical soft keys. The first one is factory settings. This allows us to reset everything to the factory state. After the OPC UA server is commissioned, we probably don't want to do this as a first option, as it could take a little bit longer to recover. This is because factory reset deletes all the port settings, certificates, and more. However, factory reset is available, and there are times we need to use it. Next, we can also export diagnostic data. In the case of unexpected behavior, this is really a good button. Definitely do feel free to get that information, send it to Siemens, and we will look and hopefully help you figure out what's happening. And finally, what we have is this change button. So here, if we push the change button, we'll see that the fields inside our main display related to logging are now editable. The first thing on our main display is the OPC UA server version. So here we can see that it's 3.1 Service Pack 5, and next we're able to configure if we want logging on or not. One thing to keep in mind is that logging is a burden on the CPU, therefore we don't want logging on if we don't need it. By default, logging is usually turned off automatically after 30 days, which is a nice feature to optimize resources on the CPU. Next, you can select the level. This configures which events are captured in the log. Here, we can specify the capturing of errors, warnings, or all events if we wish to. Then, we can specify the number of log files and the number of records on each log. And finally, we have the immediate flush option. So this would be if we want to immediately write events to the log rather than batching write operations. Next, we have time. One important thing is that the operating system time and the PLC time do need to be synchronized. So if you see the green check mark, it's good. If you don't, you'll see a red exclamation mark. And finally, on this screen, we see the maximum number of monitored items, which for the system shown is 100. This completes the diagnostic area of the OPC UA server. Next, we will get into the archiving area. The archiving utility allows us to do a couple different things. We could take a full archive, we could take a backup archive, or we could take a setup archive for serial commissioning. We can also store archives. The most important thing to take away is that we do need to create an internal OPC UA archive if we want that to be a part of our HMI archive and operate. Some of you may be familiar with the process of going to SINUMERIK Operate to set up and then set up archive. When we create an HMI archive, the OPC UA data can be part of it, but we do want to take a backup archive first. So to illustrate this point, I have opened up two different archives within a software that we call Create My Config Diff. On the left side here, we can see that without taking the OPC UA backup in advance, we don't have this .bin file. However, on the right side, for a system that was backed up after the OPC UA archive was taken, we do have the bin file. So next, for the diagnosis screen, to get to the archive screen, we would just hit back and then hit archive. So that would be how we get there. And then from here, we can see the different options. The first option is to create a backup of all the OPC UA server data. For this option, what's important to remember is that this backup is backing up everything. So this is backing up the configuration, user management, models, and most importantly, the certificates. Since this has the server certificate on it, we can only restore it to itself. If we try to restore this to a different target CNC system, then we're going to have a problem. Once we have created this backup within internal memory, though, we could reload it if anything is behaving unexpectedly. For example, maybe certificates were accidentally deleted and need to be restored. The important thing to remember here is that the port number 4840, which is the default for OPC UA communications, wouldn't be opened in the firewall by default for security reasons. So we may need to go and open that up after reading in our backup. If the system was running in the past, though, presumably the firewall has already been properly configured. The next archive option is for serial commissioning. Here, we can generate a setup archive. This would be to copy everything, essentially except the certificates. Then we can install it, if we wish, to the same system or to a whole different machine. In this case, it's important to know that you won't see the radio button unless you are logged in with manufacturer level access. Now, the last thing we can do here is to additionally export to a USB or network share. In this case, there will be a pop-up in the box that comes after you click OK that allows you to specify where you save your archive. As of server version Major Release 4, export locations within the entire SINUMERIK file system may be selected, which includes the USB and network share areas. This provides greater access to the SINUMERIK file system and is available again with Major Release 4 and onwards. In this area, the last thing that we can do is read in archives from external locations with this radio button. Importantly, though, we must remember that we cannot read in backups from different machines. Instead, we must read in setup archives because if we try to read in a backup from another machine, the server certificates within the backup would be misaligned and we would see a message like this. Finally, we can move on to the last section, which is the demonstration of the C# application. Hopefully, this will put everything all together and answer the question of why we want an OPC UA server in the first place. Normally, we want to be able to connect our OPC UA clients to it and get useful information out that's going to help us run our factories. So the example that I used is one that you may all have access to on SIOS, and that you would get there with this link. What it has in it is this helper class, which I will show you momentarily to help us with the process of creating our own application. So here I have opened up the source code to the application I created. One thing I did is I updated the target framework to .NET 7.0. When I started with the application, I also made it a Windows Forms application. The next thing I wanted to look at is the server settings. I wanted some information in my application to be persistent, and one such type of information includes the credentials to log in to my different servers from my client. So what I did is I used this .settings file here. When I first start the system, what it is going to do is jump in here and run my SINUMERIK main form. And my main form is essentially a container that's going to hold a lot of different user controls that I created for different areas. So this is the main form here, and it has user controls for the machine view, the settings, the tools, and the help objects. That was just the approach that I decided to take. Next, there are a couple of different scenarios that are covered in this demo. What I did want to show you is the Solution Explorer here. You can see that this UA Helper API. This is what you get from SIOS when you download the application. And specifically, I used the connect method here to connect to various servers that I wanted to connect to. I also used the disconnect method, the subscribe method, and the read node method. So those are the four primary methods that the application uses from the helper class. We can see that the bulk of my code exists within the SINUMERIK view area here. And once we do connect, this is where I'm building up a list of node ID strings that I'm going to read from a background event that I created on a 1-second interval. The next method demonstrated in this application, which is kind of interesting, is the subscribe method. So with the subscribe method, rather than read, we get an event that's executed every time a value changes. This is great for log files, so I'm not just appending continuously to the log file. Instead, I can just append when a monitored item value changes and work with timestamps. For example, I use this enqueue method here with the JSON file to store all the data persistently. So here we have an app data folder created just for this application with all these JSON files that include the information that I'm obtaining from the subscribe method. So now, enough talk about the application. Let's go ahead and demo it. So if I play it from here, we can see that we have a plant view. This is the view with the read example in it. The machine view utilizes the subscribe method with the helper class, which will be demoed momentarily. The settings area is where all of the information needed to connect to each different server is configured. In the tools area, I did keep the original OPC UA client. This is the full functional example from SIOS. So when you first go to that website and download the helper class and client, you'll be able to pretty much immediately play this. Look at it and understand how the developers call a wide variety of methods, many more than are demonstrated in my sample client. Finally, I put in a help page, kind of just for fun, to show some important websites, some OPC UA resources, and some of the social media channels. Now, the first thing I would do is to connect to my machine. I have a 3-axis mill here that's making widgets. If I were to press cycle start, I can actually run it, and you can see in my read example that I've changed my status to run. I've got a little progress bar that's tracking how fast I'm making parts, and I can adjust the override and see those changes being made, for example. I also have the capability to connect to a 5-axis mill. This one's also making widgets, running the Widget 2 program. Finally, I can connect it to my virtual machine. Here, if I click connect, something interesting is going to happen. We can see that there was an error. Well, there's a good reason for that. If I go back to my virtual machine and look at my rejected certificates, I can see that my application just attempted to connect to the server, but didn't have that checkbox made to accept certificates automatically. Therefore, it came into the rejected area. What I want to do is trust it, so I'm going to trust the certificate just like that. While I'm in here, I may even start the part program to begin making my widget, which happens to be an impeller. Then I'll go back here, connect, and we can see that the connection was just made like we wanted. We can now observe that the feed rate override is tracking with that of the virtual machines. So if I ramp it up a little bit, we see that it has increased. The next thing I want to do, now that we've seen the read example, is delve into the machine view. Here, I'm using the subscribe method and JSON files to create a persistent log for each machine. I have an indication of the last 7 days as well as the last 30 days. To prevent my files from growing very large, even though I'm only appending them when there's a change in the variables that I'm monitoring, I have a ring buffer sort of style where after 30 days, entries to my queue are dequeued to keep the JSON files small in size. Therefore, we can only look back 30 days at most. Next, we can examine the productivity of our other machines. Looking now at the 5-axis mill, we can see it looks like the last week was not so good. The machine was aborted for the majority of the week. However, in the last 30 days, maybe we had a fair amount of productivity. And then we could look at our 3-axis mill if we wanted as well, which was the CNC only setup. So that completes everything I wanted to show within the application here. I'm going to come back to the main presentation and pull up the final slide. At this point, if anybody has any questions, I would certainly be happy to help you with them now.
All right, perfect. Well, great job, Brian. Very, very informative webinar. Looking forward to checking out some of the videos that you're referencing. So this is our opportunity for you guys to start engaging with Brian and myself and asking some questions. So we do have some questions already in, but I would encourage everybody to just go to where it says on the top of your screen, top right corner should be ask a question. Put in as many questions as you have, and we will bang through them. Okay, so first question from Carlos. The benefits of OPC UA versus MT Connect protocol.
Awesome. That's a great question, Carlos. We actually went into that in a lot of detail in the part 1 series of this webinar. So I definitely suggest going to Mr. CNC Insights and looking through that video to the section where we talk about that. From a high level, though, to answer it now, one of the differences is that by default, I believe that MT Connect mostly supports reading, whereas with the OPC UA protocol, we can configure our access levels to be able to read and write. And the other important thing is methods. So methods are available with OPC UA, especially with the SINUMERIK server, so we can do some more advanced things with it. And the final thing would be security. So latest agents for MT Connect, I am aware, can be very secure, but a lot of you probably have those older agents that don't have quite the level of certificate safety that we get with OPC UA. So those are, in a nutshell, some of the benefits of OPC UA versus MT Connect.
Perfect. Um, so Thomas was asking, I didn't attend the first webinar and I'm having trouble finding the 3 videos mentioned.
Yep,
So that's a perfect time for us to plug our latest Mr. CNC channel, as we mentioned. So Mr. CNC Insights. So Brian, obviously you're posting them to that site, correct?
that's correct. Yep. So they're all going to appear on Mr. CNC Insights, which, like Chris introduced at the beginning, is a channel more dedicated to our service and commissioning topics. But at the same time, we also have a playlist on Mr. CNC that links, so you can go to the service and commissioning playlist on Mr. CNC and find these there as well. The full list of content is only really on Mr. CNC Insights, so there will be more there, potentially that's not yet linked on Mr. CNC.
Perfect. So core video, go to the Mr. CNC Insights channel. But if you're familiar with going just to the original Mr. CNC channel, make sure you go to our playlist, look for service, you'll find them there. Looks like Michael was asking the same question on the 3 videos. So there you go, Michael. JJ, may I receive the link, access the recording on the recorded video of part 1. I'm assuming he's talking about the webinar. Same thing on all the webinars. So you'll find the webinars sitting on, again, the Insights channel. And if you can't get there, you can go to the playlist, or remember, when you go to Mr. CNC, there is a direct link between the 2 channels and it'll dump you there as well. Okay. Will you provide the code from your application for us to download? And if yes, where?
That's a good question. I have to probably talk a little bit internally to see whether or not that's going to be a possibility. I would say, as I was developing the code, I was also learning. So, in my personal growth journey, I've spent most of my career writing PLC logic, and PC front end logic is a little bit different. So I'd probably want to clean it up just a little bit. Mostly a mock application that shows the functionality, not necessarily in a clean way, but I would say if I get the approval within Siemens to share it, absolutely, I have no qualms about sharing it.
Good. And typically with that kind of stuff, what Brian's referring to is, we just have to double check internally. There will be, or there would be some form of a disclosure form stating that obviously this was for testing and, demonstrational purposes. We can't be liable for anything used in a real application. So just that normal boilerplate stuff. But what I would say, what we've done in the past, and I think, Brian, I think we should maybe look at this and move forward with this if we can. Usually the CEOS website, the Siemens Industry Online Support website. Brian, I think you showed that early, didn't you? Where some of the
Yeah,
documentation was.
I did. I showed that.
So
Actually,
there's a section where you can plug in like white papers there. And again, they don't have to be officially released features of Siemens. It's just also an area where others can kind of put up material. So if anywhere, we could probably put it there.
yeah, that's a great idea, Chris.
That might be a good spot. Okay, good. Great question. Another one, will my OPC UA application work on my FANUC machines or only my SINUMERICs?
Okay, that's a good question. What I would say is that they're 2 different systems, and they're going to have 2 different namespaces. So your client application is going to connect to a server. Now the server is going to be making certain data available as nodes, some kind of a directory structure. Those that are available from Siemens say certainly don't match what might be available from FANUC. So you may be able to follow some kind of companion specification to more closely align them with the same names. I am not specialized on FANUC, so I don't know how to answer that with 100% certainty, but I would say that if you're willing to create a companion specification accompanying customer specific object model, then at least we have an idea of how we can more closely replicate the namespace structure, of your FANUC system.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess at the end of the day, if we take it at a very high level, if we're asking can FANUC support OPC UA, it was my understanding that the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, so I think you could be right. I have seen that. I remember in the last presentation, I did some pre-work to identify which control vendors supported OPC UA, and FANUC was one of them. I just haven't really gotten into the details of how they configure their namespace,
Sure.
exactly how it works. But really, you're if you have the ability to program your client, you can make it connect to whichever servers you like. Is really how much effort it takes, and it takes less effort if we make data structure more similar. So that would be the way I'd answer it.
Got it. Got it. So certainly, I'm hearing it's definitely worth exploring.
Yes. Oh,
It's
yeah.
not a
Definitely.
definitive no for
It's not definitive. Yeah, it's definitely worth exploring.
okay. I think I got to everyone's questions. I'll give it another minute in case anybody wants to plug in anything else while we're at that. I'll double check to make sure there's nothing in the chat. Well done, Brian. Good example and clear explanation. Very nice. Thank you for your feedback. I'm just looking to see. Sometimes, they squirrel these things away in these different panels, but I think I got to everybody. If I didn't, I certainly apologize. And, just reach out to Brian. You have his email there or myself. Oh, looks like another question popped up. It's our buddy Greg. So what about the 802 connectivity to OPC? Ooh, that's interesting. Does
Yeah,
802 support OPC UA?
that's a good question. So the webinar today has been primarily focused on three platforms, essentially maybe four. So we have the 828 and the 840, which was the P60 option with B preceding it, with A preceding rather, and then the SINUMERIK 1 and MC, which again was the P67 option for Access My Machine. And that's what gives you that SINUMERIK namespace. With those other controls, we would have to use something like a brownfield connector. So we would use another product to make that data available. Um, if there's a big need for it, that this is certainly something I can look into and maybe produce more content on. But it would be a different namespace that you're connecting to, not the same one that we've been looking at.
Interesting. Okay. Well, cool. So it's something that we can explore. Do we know if the 808 is supporting OPC UA?
So I think this scenario is the same as the 802.
Okay.
This is going to be with the connection of third party, not third party, but of additional hardware. So I believe Siemens does have an offering, but it's additional versus running it kind of natively inside our NC.
And I guess back to the earlier question on the FANUC, we can always use the brownfield connector if the system doesn't natively support it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, that's actually a better idea. So yeah, I should have thought of that initially. We do have the capability, I believe, to connect to FANUC systems
And
through
just to
a gateway
explain the
product.
brownfield connector, so our colleagues on the services side, the CS side, have created a product they refer to as their brownfield connector that allows connectivity to any system. And it's really for that kind of purpose. I think you can even do it to much simpler systems too, right, Brian? Isn't there even a
Oh,
path, like if you want to get some simple analytics from even just basic motors or or
yeah,
basic equipment that don't even necessarily have a full control, right?
right. So we're still talking a little bit about the City Merrick portfolio when we talk about the brownfield. I think they call it brownfield connectivity gateway. But if we step outside of that, but we still remain in the Siemens portfolio, there are a number of OPC UA gateway products that we could integrate. So, for example, maybe we have a network with ET200SP or maybe ET200M or some distributed I/O. We could potentially fit a OPC UA gateway to that network and directly get that data, uh, you know, irrespective of the state of the control.
Sure.
So yeah, there's a whole host of products in this portfolio, and we've only touched really on one, which is SINUMERIK Access My Machine OPC UA.
Very cool. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We certainly appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you in future events. Thank you, Brian. Great job as always. Much appreciated. And with that, everybody have a great holiday weekend, and we'll talk soon. If you are going to be at IMTS, please stop by. Both myself, Brian, and Dan, my whole team will be out there bouncing between booths for the most part in our main booth. So by all means, come by, say hello. And if you have time and you're in our booth, we are also having a little putter challenge, and you can get entered in to win a custom putter that was machined by yours truly. So it might be something fun as well. So hopefully you're out at the show and you can stop by and say hello. So with that, everybody have a great weekend. Brian, have a great weekend, and we look forward to talking to you soon.